My best friend stole my wedding so she could marry my ex-boyfriend. She swore she was only helping me plan my big day. I believed her until I saw her walking down the aisle in my dress at my venue. Jessica and I had been inseparable since our freshman year of college, bonding over late-night study sessions and dreams of building successful careers while maintaining close friendships. She was studying event planning and hospitality management while I pursued pre-med, and we often joked that she'd plan my wedding someday while I'd be the doctor who delivered her babies. She was bubbly, organized, and had an eye for detail that made her the perfect person to trust with life's important moments. Our friendship had weathered everything: failed relationships, family drama, academic stress, and the natural growing pains that come with transitioning from teenagers to young adults. Jessica was the person I called when I needed advice, the friend who showed up with ice cream after breakups, and the roommate who quizzed me for organic chemistry exams at 2 a.m. She felt more like a sister than a friend, which made what happened later so devastating. The first crack in our friendship appeared during my junior year, when I started dating David Mitchell. He was a senior in the business program, tall, charming, with the kind of easy confidence that drew people to him like a magnet. We met in a statistics class that satisfied requirements for both our majors, and the attraction was immediate and mutual. David and I quickly became the kind of couple that other people envied. We had fun together, supported each other's goals, and seemed to balance each other perfectly. He was social and outgoing where I was more studious and reserved, while I was ambitious and driven where he was more laid back and flexible. We talked about getting married after graduation, maybe moving to the same city for graduate school, building a life together. Jessica seemed happy for us at first, but I noticed subtle changes in her behavior around David. She would find excuses to join us when we went out, inserting herself into conversations and activities in ways that felt slightly intrusive. She started dressing differently when she knew David would be around. More makeup, tighter clothes, an extra effort that seemed designed to attract attention. Jessica's really come out of her shell lately, David mentioned one evening after she'd spent 2 hours at our apartment, ostensibly helping me study, but actually monopolizing his attention with stories and jokes. She's always been friendly, I said, though privately I was beginning to feel uncomfortable with how often she found reasons to be around my boyfriend. The situation came to a head during spring break of junior year. David and I had planned a romantic weekend getaway to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, but Jessica convinced me to let her join us because she was going through a rough time after a breakup with her latest boyfriend. What should have been a couple's retreat turned into an awkward threesome dynamic, with Jessica constantly competing for David's attention and finding ways to position herself between us during group photos, restaurant dinners, and beach activities. She wore a bikini that was barely legal, flirted shamelessly with David when she thought I wasn't looking, and made comments about how some people didn't appreciate what they had. I think Jessica has a crush on you, I told David on our last night of the trip, after Jessica had spent the entire day making eyes at him and finding excuses to touch his arm during conversations. David looked uncomfortable. I think you might be right, he admitted. She's been pretty forward lately. I've tried to keep things friendly but appropriate, but she doesn't seem to be taking the hint. Should I talk to her about it? Maybe? I don't want to cause drama between you two, but it's getting kind of awkward. I did talk to Jessica, and the conversation went about as poorly as possible. She denied having any romantic interest in David, accused me of being jealous and insecure, and suggested that maybe I was imagining problems because I wasn't confident enough in my relationship. You're being paranoid, she said when I brought up her behavior during the trip. David and I are just friends. If you can't handle your boyfriend having female friends, maybe you're not as mature as you think you are. The accusation stung because it played into my own insecurities about being in my first serious relationship. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into innocent interactions. Maybe the problem was my own jealousy rather than Jessica's inappropriate behavior. But the tension continued to build over the following months. Jessica would make comments about how David deserved someone who appreciated his social nature, how some people were too focused on academics to pay proper attention to their relationships, how it was important for couples to have fun together instead of always studying. She also started sharing more details about her own dating life, specifically about the men who were interested in her, but whom she was holding out for someone special. She'd describe her ideal man in terms that sounded suspiciously like David: tall, business-minded, socially confident, with light brown hair and hazel eyes. The breaking point came during a party at the end of junior year. I had spent the evening studying for a final exam and arrived late to find Jessica deep in conversation with David, sitting closer to him than was appropriate and laughing at everything he said. When she saw me, she didn't move away or acknowledge my presence. Instead, she doubled down on her flirtatious behavior. David was just telling me about his internship plans, she said with a bright smile. It sounds so exciting, much more interesting than spending the summer in a research lab. The comment was clearly directed at me, since I had just accepted a research position at the university hospital for the summer. It was exactly the kind of passive-aggressive dig that Jessica had been making for months. Ostensibly supportive, but actually designed to highlight differences between us in ways that made me look boring or overly serious. I'm excited about the research opportunity, I said evenly. It'll be great preparation for medical school applications. Of course it will, Jessica replied in a tone that suggested she thought my priorities were misguided. It's just nice to see someone who knows how to balance work and fun. She looked directly at David as she said this. That night, David and I had our first serious fight about Jessica's behavior and my response to it. I accused him of encouraging her attention. He accused me of being controlling and jealous. The fight escalated until we were both saying things we didn't mean, and I stormed out of his apartment feeling hurt and confused. We broke up 3 days later, supposedly because we were growing in different directions and needed to figure out what we really wanted. But the real reason was that Jessica's constant interference had created enough tension and doubt to poison what had been a happy, healthy relationship. The breakup was devastating for me. I had genuinely loved David and had begun to envision a future with him. More than that, I felt like I'd lost my first real relationship to my best friend's manipulations. Though I couldn't prove prove that she deliberately sabotaged us. Jessica was incredibly supportive during the breakup, offering shoulder to cry on and endless reassurances that David hadn't deserved me anyway. She brought me tissues and chocolate, listened to me analyze every conversation and text message, and assured me that I was better off without someone who didn't appreciate my ambition and intelligence. You'll find someone who actually values what an amazing woman you are, she told me repeatedly. David was never good enough for you anyway. Her support felt genuine and helped me get through the initial pain of the breakup. I was grateful to have a friend who put my emotional well-being ahead of any awkwardness about the situation, and I felt guilty for having suspected her of undermining my relationship. 2 weeks after David and I broke up, Jessica started dating him. She presented it as an unexpected development that just happened when they ran into each other at a coffee shop and ended up talking for hours. She was apologetic and concerned about my feelings, asking multiple times if I was okay with them exploring a romantic connection. I would never do anything to hurt you, she said when she told me about their first date, but we really connected when we talked, and I think there might be something special between us. I hope you can be happy for me if this turns out to be something real. What could I say? David and I had broken up. I had no claim on him anymore. Jessica was my best friend, and if she'd found love with my ex-boyfriend, I was supposed to be supportive and mature about it. But privately, I felt like I was watching the culmination of a plan that Jessica had been executing for months. She had systematically undermined my relationship with David, created enough tension to cause our breakup, and then immediately stepped in to comfort him during his vulnerable post-relationship period. The most infuriating part was that I couldn't prove any of it. Each individual action could be explained as innocent coincidence or well-meaning friendship. Jessica's flirtation could be dismissed as natural personality traits, our breakup could be attributed to normal relationship problems, and their subsequent romance could be seen as an organic development between two people who discovered they had feelings for each other. Jessica and David's relationship moved quickly, progressing from casual dating to serious commitment in a matter of months. She was everything with him that she'd criticized me for not being: fun-loving, social, spontaneous, and completely devoted to making him happy. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies and medical school applications, trying to build a life that didn't revolve around the relationship I'd lost, or the friend who had replaced me in it. I was accepted to an excellent medical school program across the country, which provided the perfect opportunity to start fresh in a new city. Jessica and David broke up the summer before I left for medical school, supposedly because they realized they were better as friends and wanted different things out of life. Jessica was heartbroken and leaned on me for emotional support, just as I had leaned on her after my breakup with David. I thought he was the one, she sobbed during one of our last conversations before I moved away. I can't believe I was so wrong about what we had together. I comforted her as best I could, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their breakup than she was telling me. David had seemed genuinely happy with Jessica, and their relationship had appeared solid from the outside. The sudden end seemed out of character for both of them. Medical school was exactly the fresh start I needed. I was challenged academically, made new friends, and eventually met someone who would become the love of my life. Ryan was a fellow medical student, kind, intelligent, supportive, and completely different from David in all the best ways. He was serious about his career, but also knew how to have fun, ambitious, but not competitive with me, and confident enough in himself that he didn't need constant validation or attention. Ryan and I dated for 2 years before getting engaged, and our relationship was everything I'd hoped my partnership with David could have been. We studied together, supported each other through the stress of clinical rotations, and planned a future that included both our professional goals and our shared life together. When Ryan proposed, Jessica was one of the first people I called to share the news. She was living back in our hometown, working for an event planning company and dating someone new, and she seemed genuinely excited about my engagement. "I'm so happy for you," she squealed over the phone. "Ryan sounds absolutely perfect for you. When's the wedding? Please tell me you'll let me help plan it." Jessica's enthusiasm about planning my wedding felt like a return to the close friendship we'd shared in college before things got complicated with David. She had always been creative and organized, and her professional experience in event planning made her the obvious choice to help coordinate the celebration. "I would love your help," I told her. "But I should warn you that we're on a pretty tight budget. Medical school loans aren't exactly conducive to lavish weddings. Budget weddings are my specialty," Jessica assured me. "I can make your day absolutely magical without breaking the bank. It'll be so much fun to plan together." The timing was perfect because I was entering my 4th year of medical school, which meant clinical rotations, board exams, and residency applications. I barely had time to sleep, let alone plan a wedding, and having Jessica handle the details while I focused on my studies seemed like an ideal arrangement. Jessica threw herself into wedding planning with an enthusiasm that reminded me why I'd loved her friendship so much. She researched venues, interviewed vendors, and created detailed spreadsheets comparing costs and options. She sent me photos and descriptions of everything, asking for my input while handling all the legwork herself. "This venue is gorgeous, and within your budget," she'd text, along with pictures of a beautiful garden location. "The photographer I found has an amazing portfolio, and is offering a discount for medical students. The florist can do your dream bouquet for half what other places quoted." I was grateful beyond words for Jessica's help, and impressed by her ability to find high-quality options within our limited budget. She seemed to have connections everywhere, and a talent for negotiating deals that saved us hundreds of dollars on everything from the dress to the catering. "I don't know what I would do without you," I told her during one of our planning calls. "You're making this so much easier than I ever imagined." "That's what maids of honor are for," Jessica replied. "I want your wedding day to be absolutely perfect." As the wedding approached, Jessica took on more and more responsibility for coordinating details. She communicated directly with vendors, handled contract negotiations, and managed the timeline for setup and delivery. I was happy to let her take the lead since I was dealing with the stress of 4th year rotations and residency interviews. "Just focus on becoming a doctor," Jessica told me when I apologized for not being more involved in the final planning stages. "Leave the wedding to me. That's what I'm good at, and I want to take this stress off your shoulders." The week before the wedding, I was completely overwhelmed with final exams and last-minute residency application requirements. Jessica assured me that everything was under control and that all I needed to do was show up and be beautiful on my wedding day. "All the vendors are confirmed, all the payments are made, all the details are handled," she told me during our final planning call. "You're going to have the wedding of your dreams." I went to bed the night before my wedding feeling incredibly grateful for Jessica's friendship and excited about marrying Ryan in front of our family and friends. After years of of hard work and sacrifice, I was finally getting my happy ending. I woke up on my wedding morning to my phone ringing at 6 a.m. The caller ID showed my venue coordinator, which seemed strange since Jessica was supposed to be handling all vendor communications. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to call this early," the coordinator said, "but I wanted to give you as much notice as possible. We received a call yesterday evening from someone claiming to represent you, saying that you needed to cancel today's event due to a family emergency." My heart stopped. "Cancel the event? Who called you?" "A woman named Jessica Thompson. She said she was your wedding planner and that you'd had a death in the family and needed to postpone the wedding indefinitely. She requested that we refund the deposit to a different account than the one the original payment came from." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake and filled with dread. I don't have a family emergency. The wedding is supposed to happen today. Jessica is my maid of honor, not my wedding planner. "Oh no," the coordinator said. "This sounds like there's been some kind of miscommunication. Let me check our records. It looks like we did process a cancellation and refund yesterday afternoon. I'm so sorry, but we don't have your event on our schedule for today." I hung up the phone and immediately called Jessica, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried calling the photographer, the florist, and the caterer, but got similar stories from each of them. Jessica had contacted them claiming to represent me, saying there was a family emergency that required postponing the wedding, and requesting refunds to accounts I'd never authorized. Every single vendor had been canceled, and all the deposit money I'd given Jessica to manage had been refunded to accounts I knew nothing about. I called Ryan in a panic, explaining what I discovered. He immediately came over to my apartment, and we spent the next hour calling every vendor and trying to understand the scope of what had happened. The pattern was consistent. Jessica had contacted each vendor claiming there was a family emergency, requested cancellations and refunds, and provided bank account information for the deposits to be returned to. She had done this systematically over the previous 3 days, while assuring me that everything was perfectly planned and under control. Our wedding was supposed to start in 8 hours, and we had no venue, no photographer, no flowers, no catering, and no idea where the thousands of dollars in deposits had gone. "Maybe there's some kind of explanation," Ryan said, though he looked as sick as I felt. "Maybe Jessica had some kind of medical emergency or family crisis that made her panic and make bad decisions." I wanted to believe that there was an innocent explanation, but the systematic nature of the cancellation suggested something much more deliberate. Jessica hadn't made a mistake or panicked. She had methodically destroyed my wedding while pretending to be my supportive maid of honor. I kept calling Jessica throughout the morning, but her phone remained off. I drove to her apartment, but no one answered the door. I called her mother, who said she hadn't heard from Jessica in several days and had no idea where she might be. Meanwhile, our wedding guests were preparing to attend a ceremony that no longer existed. Our families had traveled from across the country, friends had taken time off work, and everyone was expecting to celebrate our marriage in a few hours. Ryan and I made the devastating decision to call off the wedding. We spent the morning calling family members and close friends, explaining that there had been an emergency with our vendors and that we needed to postpone the ceremony. We didn't go into details about Jessica's role in the disaster because we were still hoping there might be some explanation that would make sense of what had happened. The phone calls were heartbreaking. Our parents were confused and worried, our friends were shocked and supportive, and everyone wanted to know if there was anything they could do to help salvage the situation. "Could we find a different venue and have a simple ceremony anyway?" my mother suggested. "We're all here, and we just want to see you two get married." We considered trying to throw together a last-minute alternative, but without a photographer to capture the memories, flowers for the ceremony, or food for the reception, it felt like settling for a pale imitation of what we'd planned and saved for. "I want our wedding day to be special," I told Ryan through tears. "I don't want to look back on it as the day everything fell apart because my best friend betrayed me." That afternoon, while Ryan and I were trying to figure out how to move forward, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is David Mitchell. I know this is strange timing, but I need to talk to you about Jessica. Can you call me when you get this? It's important." David was the last person I wanted to hear from on what was supposed to be my wedding day, but his message suggested he had information about Jessica that might explain what had happened. I called him back immediately. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you today," David said. "I heard about your wedding being canceled, and I think Jessica might be involved in something that you need to know about." "What do you mean?" "Jessica and I have been seeing each other again for the past few months," David said. "She told me that you two had grown apart and that you probably wouldn't care if we were together. But last week, she started talking about planning a surprise for our anniversary, and some of the things she said made me suspicious." "What kind of things?" "She kept talking about how she was finally going to get the wedding she'd always dreamed of, and how some people didn't appreciate what they had, so they didn't deserve to keep it. She also came into some money recently, said she'd gotten paid for a big event planning project, and used it to book a venue and vendors for what she said was going to be a surprise vow renewal ceremony for us." My heart sank as I understood what David was telling me. Jessica hadn't just canceled my wedding. She had stolen my deposits to fund her own wedding to my ex-boyfriend. "David, Jessica and I were never estranged," I said. "She's been planning my wedding for months. She was supposed to be my maid of honor today." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Oh my God," David said finally. "Sarah, I had no idea. She told me you two barely spoke anymore and that you wouldn't care if we got back together. She said you were focused on your career and didn't have time for old friends. When is your wedding supposed to happen?" "Next Saturday." "She booked the same venue you were supposed to use today, hired the same photographer and florist, even ordered similar flowers. She said she'd found all these vendors who were offering amazing deals." The betrayal was so complete and calculated that I could barely process it. Jessica hadn't just sabotaged my wedding day. She had systematically stolen every detail I had planned and was using my own vendors, paid for with my own money, to marry the man she had helped me lose years earlier. "David, she stole my wedding," I said. "She canceled all my vendors this week and had the deposits refunded to her own accounts. She's using my money to pay for your wedding." "I can't believe this," David said. "Sarah, I am so sorry. I never would have gone along with any of this if I had known what she was doing." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront her immediately and call off this wedding," David said. "This is insane. I can't marry someone who would do something like this to anyone, especially not to you." After I hung up with David, I felt a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. At least now I understood what had happened and why. But that didn't fix the disaster that my wedding day had become. Ryan and I spent the evening with our families, trying to make the best of a terrible situation. Our parents and siblings were incredibly supportive, offering to help us pursue legal action against Jessica and to assist with planning a replacement wedding when we were ready. "That woman is going to pay for what she did to to you, my mother said fiercely. This is theft, fraud, and emotional damage. We're not going to let her get away with it. But pursuing legal action felt overwhelming when I was already dealing with the stress of medical school and preparing for residency. All I wanted was to put the whole experience behind me and move on with my life. The next morning, Jessica finally returned my calls. Sarah, I am so sorry about yesterday, she said, and for a moment she sounded like the friend I'd known for years. I can explain everything. You stole my wedding, Jessica. You canceled every vendor and took my deposit money to fund your own wedding to David. It's not like that, Jessica said, but her voice was already becoming defensive. I was trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. What mistake? Marrying the man I love? Ryan isn't right for you, Jessica said. You're settling because you think he's safe and stable, but you don't have any passion with him. You're going to end up miserable in a boring marriage that suffocates your spirit. I was stunned by the arrogance of her presumption. You don't get to make that decision for me. Someone had to, Jessica replied. You were so caught up in your medical school bubble that you couldn't see how wrong Ryan was for you. I was trying to spare you years of regret. By stealing my money and marrying my ex-boyfriend? David and I belong together, Jessica said, and her tone shifted from defensive to triumphant. We always did. You were just in the way for a while, but now we can finally be happy. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Jessica alternating between justifying her actions as being for my own good and expressing satisfaction about finally getting the man and the wedding she felt she deserved. She showed no remorse for the emotional damage she'd caused or the financial theft she'd committed. You'll thank me someday, she said before hanging up. When you find someone who actually appreciates you for who you are, you'll realize I did you a favor. Ryan and I postponed our wedding and focused on completing medical school and beginning our residencies. We moved across the country for our programs, putting physical distance between ourselves and the painful memories of our ruined wedding day. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Jessica Thompson and David Mitchell were inviting me to celebrate their marriage at the venue that was supposed to have hosted my wedding, with the photographer who was supposed to have captured my memories, surrounded by the flowers I had selected for my own bouquet. The audacity of inviting me to watch her enjoy the wedding she had stolen from me was breathtaking. I threw the invitation away without responding, but my mother, who had also received an invitation, was not willing to let the insult pass unchallenged. That girl has some nerve, she said when she called to tell me about the invitation. She destroys your wedding and then invites you to watch her enjoy the one she bought with your money? I just want to forget about the whole thing, Mom. Well, I don't, my mother said. Your father and I are going to that wedding. What? Why would you do that? Because someone needs to represent you and make sure people know what really happened. Jessica has been telling everyone that you canceled your wedding because you got cold feet, and that she helped you realize Ryan wasn't the right person. She's making herself look like the supportive friend who saved you from a mistake. I hadn't heard about Jessica's version of events, but it made sense that she would try to control the narrative in a way that made her look sympathetic rather than criminal. My parents attended Jessica's wedding and reported back that it was indeed identical to the celebration I had planned. Same venue, same vendors, same floral arrangements, even the same menu I had selected months earlier. Jessica wore a different dress, but everything else was exactly what she had helped me choose for my own wedding day. She stood up during the reception and gave a speech about how she was finally getting her fairy tale ending, my mother told me. She thanked everyone for supporting her journey to find true love and said she'd never been happier. Did she mention me at all? She said you were focusing on your career and couldn't make it to the wedding, but that she knew you'd be happy for her. She made it sound like you two were still close friends. The final insult was Jessica's post-wedding social media campaign, which featured dozens of photos from her celebration, along with captions about dreams coming true and finding your soulmate. She tagged me in several posts, thanking me for being such a supportive friend and for helping her realize what she really wanted in life. The comments on her posts were filled with congratulations from mutual friends and family members who didn't know the real story behind her happiness. Jessica was basking in the attention and praise while I was dealing with the emotional and financial aftermath of her betrayal. I blocked Jessica on all social media platforms and asked my friends and family not to share information about her with me. I wanted to move forward with my life without being constantly reminded of what she had done. Ryan and I eventually planned a small, intimate wedding during a break in our residency programs. We kept the ceremony simple and private, inviting only immediate family members and a few close friends. It was beautiful and meaningful in a way that our original celebration might not have been, focused entirely on our commitment to each other, rather than on impressing others or creating a perfect event. I'm glad it happened this way, Ryan said during our minimalist reception dinner. This feels more like us than a big traditional wedding would have. I agreed, though I still felt angry about having to rebuild our celebration from scratch because of Jessica's sabotage. We had lost not only the money she stole, but also the opportunity to celebrate with extended family and friends who couldn't attend our hastily rescheduled ceremony. 3 years into our residencies, I was working in the emergency department when Jessica was brought in as a patient. She had been in a car accident, not serious, but requiring evaluation for possible concussion and treatment for various cuts and bruises. Seeing her name on the patient list made my heart race, but I was the attending physician on duty and couldn't avoid treating her. Professional ethics required me to provide the same quality care I would give to any patient, regardless of personal history. Jessica recognized me immediately when I entered her examination room. Sarah? She said, looking shocked. Oh my God, I had no idea you worked here. I'm Dr. Williams now, I said, maintaining professional composure. I'm going to examine you for signs of head trauma and treat your injuries. The examination was surreal, touching the person who had betrayed me so completely, checking her pupils and reflexes while she made small talk about her life since the wedding. David and I are doing so well, she said while I cleaned the cut on her forehead. We just bought a house in the suburbs. I'm hoping we'll start a family soon. I focused on my medical duties and said nothing personal in response. I know things ended badly between us, Jessica continued, apparently unable to read the room, but I hope you can see now that I was right about Ryan. You seem so much happier as a doctor than you would have been as a housewife. The comment was so tone-deaf and insulting that I had to pause in my work to collect myself. Mrs. Mitchell, I said formally, I need to ask you some questions about your medical history for my report. Of course, Jessica said, apparently not understanding that I was deliberately avoiding personal conversation. But Sarah, I really hope we can be friends again someday. I miss talking to you. I completed Jessica's treatment and discharge paperwork as quickly as possible, then asked another physician to handle her follow-up care. Seeing her again had brought back all the anger and hurt I thought I'd moved past. past, and I needed time to process the emotions. That evening, I talked to Ryan about the encounter. How did it feel to see her again? He asked. Awful, I admitted. She acted like we were old friends who'd had some minor disagreement, not like someone who stole our wedding and ruined one of the most important days of our lives. Some people are incapable of acknowledging the harm they cause, Ryan said. She probably genuinely believes she was helping you by sabotaging our wedding. The worst part is that she seemed to expect gratitude. Like I should thank her for destroying my wedding day because it led to me becoming a doctor. You were always going to become a doctor, Ryan pointed out. Your career success has nothing to do with her sabotage and everything to do with your own hard work and talent. 5 years after our small wedding, Ryan and I were both established in our careers and thinking about starting a family. We had built a good life together, surrounded by supportive friends and colleagues who valued honesty and loyalty. I was at a medical conference when I ran into David Mitchell in the hotel lobby. He looked older and tired, nothing like the confident young man I dated in college. Sarah, he said when he recognized me. I wasn't sure if I should approach you, but I wanted to say something if I had the chance. What's that? I wanted to apologize for what happened with your wedding, David said. I know I said this before, but I really had no idea what Jessica was planning. If I had known she was stealing from you, I never would have married her. How are things going with Jessica? I asked, more out of professional curiosity than personal interest. David's expression darkened. We're getting divorced, he said. It turns out that stealing your wedding was part of a pattern of manipulative and dishonest behavior that I was too blind to see at the time. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be, David replied. Marrying Jessica was the biggest mistake of my life. She's incapable of genuine love or loyalty. Everything is about what other people can do for her or how she can benefit from relationships. David went on to describe 5 years of marriage to someone who lied constantly, manipulated situations to get her way, and showed no empathy for anyone else's needs or feelings. Jessica had run up credit card debt, cheated on him multiple times, and ultimately left him for someone with more money and social status. She told me recently that she never actually loved me, David said. She said she married me because she wanted to prove that she could take something away from you, and because she was jealous of the happiness you seemed to have. That's incredibly sad, I said, and I meant it. Jessica had destroyed multiple relationships and hurt numerous people in pursuit of something that hadn't even made her happy. I think about our relationship sometimes, David continued. We were good together before Jessica started interfering. I've always wondered what might have happened if we'd been stronger or smarter about recognizing what she was doing. We were young, I said, and we trusted someone who didn't deserve our trust. But I'm happy with how my life turned out, and I hope you find happiness too. David smiled sadly. You're more generous than I deserve. I should have seen through Jessica's manipulation and protected our relationship instead of letting her drive us apart. After David walked away, I reflected on how different my life might have been if Jessica hadn't systematically destroyed my first serious relationship. But I felt grateful rather than regretful. Ryan was a better partner for me than David had ever been, and our marriage was stronger because it was built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than youthful attraction. Jessica had tried to control my romantic life based on her own jealousy and selfish desires, but ultimately her interference had led me to find someone who was truly right for me. 2 years later, Ryan and I welcomed our first child, a healthy baby girl we named Emma. She was perfect in every way, and holding her for the first time made me understand that everything I'd been through had led me to this moment of complete happiness. Jessica's betrayal no longer felt like the defining tragedy of my young adulthood. Instead, it felt like a painful but necessary lesson about recognizing toxic relationships and protecting myself from people who would harm me for their own benefit. I never heard from Jessica again directly, but I occasionally received updates through mutual acquaintances. She had moved to another state after her divorce from David, changed careers several times, and continued to leave a trail of burned bridges and broken relationships behind her. She never learned, one former friend told me. She's still the same person who thinks the world owes her everything, and that other people exist to serve her needs. Some people, I realized, never develop the capacity for genuine remorse or personal growth. Jessica would probably continue to manipulate and betray people for the rest of her life, always finding ways to justify her actions and blame others for the consequences. When Emma was 5 years old, she asked me about my wedding day while looking through our photo albums. Mommy, why are there only pictures of you and Daddy and Grandma and Grandpa at your wedding? She asked. Because we wanted a small, intimate ceremony with just the people who loved us most, I explained. But what about your friends? The friends who really mattered were there, I said. Sometimes you learn that people you thought were friends actually weren't, and that's okay because it helps you appreciate the real friends in your life. Emma nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to her 5-year-old understanding of relationships. Looking back on Jessica's betrayal 15 years later, I can see how it shaped my approach to friendship and trust. I became more careful about who I allowed into my inner circle, more observant of red flags in relationships, and more willing to set boundaries with people who demonstrated selfish or manipulative behavior. I also became more appreciative of the genuine friends who entered my life during and after medical school, people who celebrated my successes without jealousy, supported me through challenges without expecting anything in return, and demonstrated loyalty through their actions rather than just their words. Jessica taught me that some people are incapable of putting friendship above their own desires, and that trusting someone with important responsibilities or relationships requires careful observation of their character over time. She also taught me that betrayal, while painful, doesn't have to define your future or prevent you from finding genuine happiness. The wedding she stole from me would have been beautiful, but it wouldn't have been any more meaningful than the intimate ceremony Ryan and I eventually shared. The love we celebrated was the same regardless of the venue, vendors, or guest list, and our marriage has been strong regardless of how it began. Jessica's attempts to control my romantic life and steal my happiness ultimately failed because she fundamentally misunderstood what makes relationships work. She thought love was about competition, manipulation, and taking what you want from others. But real love is about partnership, support, and choosing someone who brings out the best in you. In trying to prove that she could take everything I had, Jessica revealed that she had nothing authentic to offer anyone. Her marriage to David failed because it was based on deception and revenge, rather than genuine compatibility. Her friendships ended because she viewed other people as resources to be exploited rather than relationships to be nurtured. The cruelest thing Jessica did at my wedding was not just stealing my celebration, but doing it while pretending to be my supportive friend. She stood by my side knowing she had destroyed my wedding day, comforted me while secretly planning to announce her own engagement to my ex-boyfriend, and smiled while watching my dreams crumble. But cruelty, I learned, ultimately says more about the person inflicting it than the person receiving it. Jessica's actions revealed her character completely, and that revelation was actually a gift that protected me from years of continued manipulation and betrayal. The woman who was supposed to be my maid of honor showed me exactly who she really was, and in doing so, she set me free to find people who were worthy of my trust and love. Today, I'm surrounded by friends who would never dream of sabotaging my happiness, married to a man who supports my dreams instead of competing with them, and raising a daughter in an environment of genuine love and security. Jessica may have stolen my wedding day, but she gave me something more valuable in return: the knowledge that I deserve better than what she was capable of offering, and the strength to demand authenticity in all my relationships. That lesson was worth more than any wedding could ever be.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.